Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Express Podcasts. In the third part of our 5-part series, in association with Central Square Foundation, we will talk about the significance of play-based learning as a part of early childhood education, or ECE, for children aged 3 to 6 years. ECE plays a pivotal role as step 0 before school, and CSF believes quality pre-primary education for all 5-year-olds in government schools is crucial to advancing foundational literacy and numeracy for children. And in early childhood education, play-based learning plays a significant role by fostering holistic development. In the play-based learning approach, children engage in activities that allow them to explore, experiment, and discover concepts through play, supporting their emotional, physical, and social growth. Joining me in this conversation will be Professor Venita Kaul, who is Professor Emerita Education, Ambedkar University, Delhi, from where she retired in 2016 as Director of School of Education Studies and Founder Director of Center for Early Childhood Education and Development. We will also be joined by Anustup Nayak, who is the Project Director for Early Childhood Education at CSF. Later in the show, I will be in conversation with Suman, who is an Aanganwadi worker. We will begin by talking to Professor Venita and Anustup. Professor Venita, starting with you, how important do you think play-based learning is in the context of India's early childhood education?
I think it is very important, and that is why it has actually got included as a main strategy, pedagogy for children in this age group of 3 to 8 years, because we have been in India focusing too much on formal learning and rote learning. And the children at this stage need to have a much more holistic education, a holistic education that will help develop them holistically, which means that they need to have experiences which will be able to cater to their different domains of development, such as language development, creative development, socio-emotional development, their cognitive development, physical development. So the only way that can be done is to be able to have an approach which can cater to all the developmental domains equitably. And that is what play-based pedagogy does, as opposed to rote learning, which has been found to be counterproductive.
Right. And on one hand, we need children to acquire pre-literacy and pre-numeracy skills. And on the other hand, as Professor Kaul also mentioned, play-based learning is important for this age group. So, Anustup, is this an either-or kind of a situation, or can both the things coexist as well?
I completely agree with what Professor Kaul said. I wouldn't say it is either or. Oftentimes we have this false dichotomy that we have to have this play, which is fun and games, and then learning, which is more serious. The reality is that play is at the heart of all children, right? If you see young children, they're playing, they're continuously learning how to collaborate, they're learning how to negotiate with each other's rules and relationships. They're trying to imagine things, they're trying to create things. And in doing that, they're also trying to learn how to solve problems, how to think, how to communicate. And that's really at the heart of all learning. So it is not really an either or. For example, if you have play activities where lots of children like to pretend things. I mean, all of us remember times when we were kids. I've seen kids doing this cops and robbers or some other kind of pretend play scenarios. Children get exposed to lots of new vocabulary. They build oral language skills. They have lots of conversations with others. And that's a great preparation for when they get introduced to more formal language skills. And similarly, when children are doing all kinds of things like pouring water, messing with sand and filling, they're also getting introduced to some math concepts like measurement. That's really how we should approach it, that integrate learning in a way that is bringing joy to children, that they find really meaning in, they're really actively engaging and also socially interactive. And that's the right way to learn. So we should integrate both of them, especially in early childhood education.
I think that's very well said, Anustup. I think I would just like to add to that, because most parents and most teachers are kind of obsessed with the idea of getting the alphabet across to children. But it is through the play-based method, which includes storytelling, storytelling from books, introduction of storybooks, picture storybooks for children, children get familiar with print. And that is a stepping stone to their learning to read and write later. And many children even start discovering how to read and write on their own if they have adequate and varied exposure to different texts. So storytelling is a play-based activity, but it also leads to literacy.
And can you both share some examples from your experience on how this plays out in a classroom?
Pre-literacy and pre-numeracy is actually concepts, as Anustup just said, which are essentially like playing with different kinds of things. So you learn the concepts of big and small, and that is a pre-concept of size, where ultimately you learn to have the measurement about size, which you learn in mathematics. So it's a preparation for that. Similarly, children are picking up different materials in the environment and playing with them. Sand play, for instance. From sand play, they put the sand into the glass and then take it out of the glass. And again, they put the sand into the glass. That gives them a sense of volume, some sort of an initial experiences or introduction to the whole concept of volume. So those concepts that come up formally later are actually the preparation for that. The experience and understanding happens in the earlier years through the play-based method.
I was reminded of some of the work we are doing with the UP government, where the UP government is now working on an early childhood curriculum. And there's some very interesting examples we have found, which they have included. Something like children play this game of, clap, clap or slap, snap. We play it all the time with children. And it's such a wonderful way to introduce patterns like A, B, A, B. And those are things children learn in such a playful way. It comes so naturally to you. But when these playful ways of learning are not the route for children to get to those skills, and suddenly they see all these patterns on a worksheet in grade 1 or grade 2, it is completely flummoxing to a child. And I thought that these ways of learning, which makes children do something really fun, but at the same time, they're also exercising either the cognitive side of their brain or the affective side or the linguistic side, just makes it so much more relevant when we are building up to something more in the later years.
Actually, if I could just add to that there are two essential principles of children's learning. One is agency and the other is experience. So anything that children learn at this age should involve their agency, their own initiative, their own involvement, and also give them the experience of it, a concrete experience of it. And these two elements come in through play. If you teach the same thing as Anustup is saying, formally, then it is all at the abstract level. It doesn't make sense to children. But if they experience the particular concept themselves, that is what really gives them the foundation for later learning.
Right. And Professor Kaul, from your perspective, how well is play-based learning integrated into the early childhood education policies in India? And what would be some challenges in ensuring its implementation?
The whole concept of the foundational stage itself has come from the national education policy. So to that extent, the national education policy has done a very effective and I would say very praiseworthy reform in trying to bring the early childhood education, that is the preschool part of it, and the primary part together on a continuum. So they have actually said from 3 to 8 years, whereas earlier early childhood education was from 3 to 6 years. So the reason for that is because it is very important to have a very smooth linear transition along the continuum, in the early learning continuum, along the 3 to 8 year segment, because otherwise children, if they have a break, children tend to get confused. And currently, if we have a play-based pedagogy for the early years and then we have a formal pedagogy for classes 1 and 2, that is going to create a lot of dissonance in the mind of the child and make the child very unhappy. So it has to be in continuation. So the policies have actually made these statements and have really tried to bring the two together and give the necessary importance to play across pre-primary and primary. But the field situation is not ripe enough for that. One is the parents do not have a concept of what is good early education. They believe that we should start children on reading and writing as soon as they come into a preschool even. And the same problem is there with the teachers. Teachers are not well prepared. And a very large segment of our early childhood programs are Aanganwadis. And the Aanganwadi workers are not only very ill-trained, but they are also very highly overworked because they have multiple duties. In the school system or in the Aanganwadi system, we need to provide better conditions for children to be able to get the right kind of early childhood education.
Right. And Anustup, as far as play-based learning is concerned, it sounds fun for a child. But how do you prepare teachers to do this in the class? What does the National Curriculum Framework say about play-based learning, and how are the states implementing this?
I think Venita ma'am made a very interesting point that it is for the first time that we see a very explicit call out for play-based learning in the National Curriculum Framework. I was reading it and they talk in very specific terms that children should have guided play, free play, structured play, along with conversations, outdoor activities, and they recognize it that that is the key to effective early education. And this is a very strong policy level directive. But the challenge, like Professor Kaul was saying, is how do we translate this on the ground? It is quite a challenging job to conduct a very good play-based learning classroom because it requires, like Professor Kaul was saying, a lot of preparedness on part of the teacher and also some letting go of past beliefs because we are largely used to being the sage on the stage and transferring information. But play-based learning requires the teacher and the child to work together and children to have a lot more autonomy and agency, like Professor Kaul was saying. And over the last year or so, UP government has been working on a school readiness program, a 12-week school readiness program, and we've been involved with some piloting of these programs. And we've had some very interesting learnings from the ground when it comes to preparing teachers for this kind of learning experiences. One of the first things we have discovered is that this requires a lot of very clear instructions and guidance for the teacher in terms of how to provide the right framework for children to start the activity, what kind of materials to use, and how to playfully guide some conversations before, during, and after the activity. And this needs a fair bit of scaffolding and training, given what Professor Kaul shared about the preparedness of teachers. The second thing we learned is that teaching is a very difficult job. And like the Aanganwadi workers and preschool educators are overburdened, there's a lot of load on them. So how do we scaffold them? So they also need resources like teacher guides and teaching learning materials and a lot better training. A lot of teacher training needs to move away from just regurgitation of theoretical content. Teachers also need to experience that hands-on experiential method that we are encouraging them to use in the classroom. And that's what we have seen really works on the ground. And the other big challenge is taking all of this to scale, because when you consider any state in India, it is really working with a fairly large number of teachers. How do we ensure that this training is delivered in a far more structured, standardized way to thousands and thousands of teachers? They're prepared with the right set of materials. There is proper guidance and mentoring available to teachers. So those are the things that are very necessary to bring this kind of learning in the classrooms at scale.
Right. And Professor Venita and Anustup, can you both describe to us in one line what people misunderstand most about play-based pedagogy?
In one line, I would say that people think that play-based pedagogy means just allowing children to play and not giving them opportunity to learn. So that is the misconception, that play-based pedagogy means a waste of time for children, whereas they are supposed to come into any class, whether it is preschool or in school, and start learning the alphabet and numbers. That is the misunderstanding.
And sometimes it's the other extreme that people who genuinely believe in play-based learning also need to understand that there is a lot of opportunity for free play, but there is also some need for scaffolding of children to have a meaningful activity which is to some extent engaging, but also has some boundary conditions so that there is a right balance between structure and freedom. There's the right balance between the children having the right autonomy, but also the teacher being well prepared to deliver that. So we have to really have the right balance.
And now we will be talking to Suman, who is an Aanganwadi worker and has been using play-based learning with children. This part of the conversation will be in Hindi. सुमन जी, क्या आप हमें बताएंगी कि आप अपने आंगनवाड़ी केंद्र में खेल आधारित शिक्षा को कैसे लागू करते हैं?
नमस्कार। जैसे कि मैं एक आंगनवाड़ी कार्यकर्ता हूँ, एक आंगनवाड़ी टीचर हूँ और एक आंगनवाड़ी टीचर होने के नाते मैं आपको बताना चाहूंगी कि हम जो भी अपने बच्चों को गतिविधि आंगनवाड़ी केंद्र में कराते हैं, उसमें हम बच्चों के सभी विकास का ध्यान रखते हैं। जैसे कि उनका भाषा का विकास है, शारीरिक विकास है, बौद्धिक विकास है, रचनात्मक विकास है, सामाजिक विकास है। इन सभी विकास को हम ध्यान में रखते हैं और इसी तरह से हम जो भी खेल कराते हैं, हम ध्यान रखते हैं कि उसमें बच्चे का कम से कम 5 में से 4 विकास उसके हर खेल में हो। तो मैं अपना एक खेल बताती हूँ। हमने बच्चों के लिए एक रस्सी बनाई हुई है और रस्सी में जैसे हम सीधी उसको बिछा देते हैं और उसमें बच्चे को सीधा चलने के लिए कहते हैं। उस रस्सी को हम गोल आकार में रख देते हैं, उसमें बच्चे को फिर सारे बच्चे साइड में बैठ जाते हैं और एक-एक बच्चे करके हम उसे बोलते हैं कि इस रस्सी के गोले के आपको अंदर जाना है और आपको बाहर आना है। तो सारे बच्चे एक साथ क्लैपिंग करके अंदर अंदर बाहर बाहर करते हैं। तो बच्चे को हम कहते हैं कि ध्यान से हमारी आवाज को सुनना है आपको, कि हमने अंदर कहा है तो आपको अंदर ही रहना है और बाहर कहा है तो बाहर ही आना है। तो कुछ बच्चे इस बात को ध्यान से सुनते हैं कि मैम ने अंदर बोला है तो अंदर ही रहना है। हम उन्हें कंफ्यूज करने के लिए 2 बार एक ही शब्द रिपीट कर देते हैं, अंदर अंदर, तो वो कंफ्यूज हो जाते हैं। तो इससे बच्चों का अच्छा भी लगता है उन्हें और यह है कि वो ध्यान भी लगाते हैं कि मैडम हमारी क्या कह रही हैं। और दूसरा, जैसे हमने आकार के हमें कार्डबोर्ड मिले हुए हैं, त्रिकोण, आयत, चकोर, गोल। तो उसके लिए हम बच्चों को पहले दिन हम उसको पूरे आकार दिखा करके उसको जानकारी दे देते हैं कि ये गोल है, ये चौकोर है, ये त्रिकोण है, ये आयत है। फिर अगले दिन हम फर्श पे चॉक से ही वही आकार की हम चित्र बना देते हैं। चॉक से हमने बड़ा सा त्रिकोण बना दिया, गोल बना दिया, आयत बना दिया और फिर हम एक-एक बच्चे को वो चित्र दे करके उसके हाथ में उन्हें कहते हैं कि ये जो हमने आकार बनाए हैं, इनको आप आपके हाथ में जो आकार हैं, उनको उनके सही घर में रखिए। जैसे त्रिकोण को त्रिकोण से में रखिए, गोल को गोल में रखिए, चौकोर को चौकोर में रखिए, आयत को आयत में रखिए। इस तरह से छोटी-छोटी चीज़ों से हम बच्चों को जानकारी देते हैं और उनके विकास पे ध्यान देते हैं और उनकी जानकारी बढ़ाते हैं।
जी, और सुमन जी, आपके आंगनवाड़ी केंद्र में बच्चों ने खेल-खेल में ही क्या-क्या सीखा है?
भाषा का विकास, बुद्धि का विकास, शारीरिक विकास, सामाजिक विकास और रचनात्मक विकास। ये मतलब जब बच्चा बोल रहा है, एक बच्चा खेल रहा है और बाकी बच्चे क्लैपिंग करके उसको प्रोत्साहित कर रहे हैं, तो वो भाषा का उनका विकास हो रहा है, बोलना सीख रहे हैं। जो बच्चा कूद रहा है अंदर-बाहर, वो उसकी शारीरिक विकास हो रहा है और बुद्धि लगा रहा है, मैडम की बात को सुन रहा है वो कि मैडम ने अंदर बोला है या बाहर बोला है, मुझे रस्सी में सीधे चलना है, तो अपने दिमाग को लगा रहा है। और सामाजिक विकास ये हो गया कि वो सबके साथ में मिलके एक-एक करके बच्चे अपनी-अपनी बारी का इंतज़ार करते हैं, सबके साथ मिलके खेलना सीखते हैं। ये नहीं करते कि नहीं सारे एक साथ खड़े हो गए या सारे एक साथ कूदने लग गए। तो ये समूह में रह करके वो सीख रहे हैं खेलना कि हमें समूह में रह करके कैसे कोई भी खेल करना है, कोई भी काम करना है। इसमें रचनात्मक विकास नहीं हो रहा है, लेकिन जो दूसरा गेम है हम आकार वाला करवा रहे हैं, उसमें रचनात्मक गेम हो रहा है कि उसके दिमाग में एक आकार उसके दिमाग में फिट हो रहा है कि मैम ने मुझे जो त्रिकोण दिया है, मुझे इसे त्रिकोण वाले आकार में ही ले जा करके मिलाना है। ये है मैम इनके विकास।
You were listening to Professor Venita Kaul, Anustup Nayak and Suman in the third episode of our 5-episode series in association with CSF. If you want to listen to the first and the second episode, the links for the same are provided in the description. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts or write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.